Right now, with Prentis promoting their book, there is a lot of ways and opportunities to listen more about it, especially if you like to listen rather than reading. Prentis read the book onto Audible, so it's in their voice. This is a podcast that I listened to with Adrienne Marie Brown, and I thought this was a great podcast anyway, so I wanted to bring that up and encourage you to listen if you like. One of the things that I love about this book and this work is that there's a lot of personal healing in this book. And how transforming ourselves can change the world really is the theme of the book. So, all the way through the book, right from the very beginning, Prentis is talking about their personal struggle, their personal life, what's happened in their life as a Black person, as a child in their family. Certainly, it's very grounded in personal experience. This is what an experience of one person is. And when we have that experience, then we can bring an analysis to it. So these are all quotes from the book. Our wounds can give us the initial surge to fight back, though this energy is fueled by our most frightened, defended, and adrenalized selves. Ultimately, it's not sustainable. When we think about our own nervous systems, and we do so much work around our nervous systems here, when we are dysregulated, or when we're in a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, we're not operating as our best self. A lot of the things that happen when we're dysregulated are not what we would want to have happen. Recognizing and learning about our own nervous system and those of others as well. Often when I'm engaging with other people in the world, especially in person, I'm very cognizant of what's happening in their nervous system as well as my own. And it's not enough to just heal ourselves. We live in a world, we're connected with other people. So we need to work in that context, that we're an individual in a culture, in a society, that what we do really affects everybody else. So even though sometimes we look at our bigger systems, like systemic oppression, for instance, there's nothing that I could do to make that better. That's actually not true. We can all individually work together. So it's our own work and our work as community. And the point at the beginning of this slide is we don't want to be fueling our connection from fear, defenses, and adrenaline. We want to be more regulated. So healing helps us fight in the places we need to, but love in the places we long to. Black bodies carry the weight of generations of trauma. When we look at intergenerational trauma, we look into the past. We can see that that's true with the several centuries of slavery and Jim Crow laws, if we're thinking about the United States in particular. But we can also look at that and see, too, that there's still an effect of that trauma today, that the trauma is not over. When we're looking at a lot of the healing that we do in this community, and I suspect in a lot of places, we're working with developmental trauma, things that happened to us as a child, core deficiency beliefs that were formed when we were younger. And then we see, okay, this is still going on. It's hard to heal when the trauma is still happening. Ideally, when we look at a big T trauma that happens, like, for instance, we're in a car accident or somebody we love is sick, that's something that happens. It's a big event. We have a big response to it. And then we start to heal from it. And we're never going to heal completely. Our nervous system will always remember that that could happen. But we don't have an ongoing, we don't get in a car accident every week. Healing can happen because we start to put it into the past. When we have systemic oppression and all of the different intergenerational traumas that happen, that doesn't go into the past. We're still living in this environment now. So then we have this complicated relationship here of how to heal our nervous system, how to heal from the past, and also to recognize that trauma is not over. And in Prentis's book, they're focusing on the experience of Black people. And I just want to also remind us that we're not saying that Black people are the only people who've been traumatized. What I'm saying, and what I'd like to just make sure that we're all bringing into our awareness, is that some people have a heavier load. Some have more to inherit from what history has handed down, and some will not have the capacity to address the part of it that they hold. So as a white person, I don't have the experience of being excluded, being discriminated against as a white person. I have white privilege. I can move through more like with the blue sky and a few clouds instead of the brick wall that other people would be facing because of systemic oppression and prejudice. So we're not at all saying that there's no trauma if you're not Black or if you're not Indigenous or as a person of color. But what I am saying is, and what Prentis is working with in the book, is that we have to not ignore the fact that some people are systematically oppressed in different ways. So oppression is the distribution and concentration of trauma into bodies and communities designated less powerful. As a woman, I certainly know what it's like to be discriminated against and to be oppressed and to have a lot of different things that I have to deal with because I'm in a woman's body in a patriarchal culture. So women are generally considered less powerful, same with children. And Black people also, people of color, are often discriminated against. There's a concentration of trauma. And then what happens, and I think this is something that we're all pretty familiar with, is that pain goes down ladders of power. Talking about their dad, it wasn't his boss who suffered the rage of his dehumanization. It was us, his family, those who had less power and recourse than he did. My mother first, and then the children. Let's pause there for a moment and see what that brings up for you. Does that seem true? Does that feel like, yeah, that is kind of the way it works? We're dehumanized, we feel powerless, and then we come home and we can't hold it all in. We can't stay regulated, and it comes out as oppression and harm against other people. So Prentis says, our home was both warm and to me randomly volatile. The fear was there every day, even if the violence wasn't. We have very complicated relationships with parents who are hurting us or who are violent in the family. So even though there was a lot of good things happening in that relationship, there was also that fear that was there every day. In chapter 2, in What It Takes to Heal, Prentis also goes into core deficiency beliefs about how they really felt it was their fault, that they were just bad. And we are all very familiar with core deficiency beliefs and how that works. So it wasn't his boss who suffered the rage of the dehumanization. We can't send that upwards. It goes down through the ladders of power. Take a breath. Relax your shoulders, relax your body. Just notice this is something that's here. We're looking at this right now. It's true. We might have a very personal experience in our own childhood with this, which would also give it a lot more charge in our body right now. Certainly, as adults, as we move through the world, unless you're a rich, powerful white man, we've all experienced this in some ways and in some degrees. We can't heal effectively under active threat without safety. So this is something that's also true in referencing back to the ongoing systemic oppression. The trauma is not finished with. There's the active systemic oppression, and there's also intergenerational trauma, which comes down through generations, through family. So the basis for freedom, I love this, for power, is a body where we can be alive and changing. We're not stuck in how we were 10 years ago or when we were a child. We can be alive and changing and become people who can relate to one another and the world around us. To be resilient is to be engaged, creative, adaptive, and relational. We've worked with this in so many different ways. Dr. Stephen Porges talks about healing trauma to be safe enough to relax in another's arms. So we let go of control, of defending ourselves. We stick our head out of our hiding place and we try it out. We heal in our own personal lives, and that's what allows us to do the work that brings healing to the wider world. So again, bringing the community, bringing our relationship in the world into healing, that it's directly relevant to our own healing. I think this is also something a lot of us can relate to as lifetime activists or transformational characters, whether that's happening on a big stage or in a stage of our own personal families, at work or something. Transformational characters are those of us who are committed to the work it takes to heal ourselves, our lineages, and the systems we are a part of. We are working together to transform ourselves and through our relationships. And that's the ground of working with justice, liberation, The practice ground is through the Embodiment Institute. It's an organization that's promoting justice, healing, somatic, primarily for people of color, BIPOC, and also for white people and anyone who's really interested in going deeper into the transformational character work. So if anybody's interested in being part of that, you can look up the Embodiment Institute and the practice ground. I'm part of that. I have been for over a year, and I really feel like it's transformative work and something that I really want to work deeply with. Let's go into some inquiry. I believe something comes back to us when we listen to and hold one another, and when we take the time to learn ourselves and tend to what we find. Let's go into this first question. What are some ways that systemic oppression affected your ancestors? If you're a person of color, if you're queer, if you're in a group who's being discriminated against, then it will be a direct family cultural experience. But what is your experience of that? As a white person of Scottish descent, I can see how that happened in the 1700s when the British had moved into Scotland. They were clearing out the Highlands, smashing the clan system. Probably all of us have some systemic oppression in our background, in our ancestors. So let's take a moment to work with that. All of us who are in women's bodies were affected by our mothers, grandmothers living in the patriarchy. It's another form of systemic oppression. And as we look at that, we could get more specific. What unhealed wounds affected you through your ancestors? That might be glaringly obvious. And we could also look at the ones that are maybe a little bit that we haven't really thought about as that. Some of them are a very direct line, and some of them are not as direct. Let's sit with that for a minute. What unhealed wounds, whether it was parents, extended family, grandparents, many generations ago, what are the unhealed wounds that affected you as you were growing up? If we go back to the transformational characters are those of us who are committed to the work it takes to heal ourselves, our lineages, and the systems we are a part of. We're working together to transform ourselves and through our relationships to transform these systems towards justice and liberation, toward the ability to feel and be felt. In what ways are you presently a transformational character? And be careful of the inner critic. We don't have to be the best transformational character. What ways have you done that through your lifetime? Stay present in your body in this moment as we work with this. One of the ways that might work is to put a lot of effort into not sending pain down those ladders of oppression. Maybe we really try to work hard at being kind within our family, especially if we have children or grandchildren. That's a really legitimate field or arena to be working in. As a transformational character, it might be we're working with our own, healing our own trauma so that we're not passing that on. Just let yourself feel into that. If we're going to take several minutes here, allow yourself to vision into or feel into what's possible. How could you move more deeply into that? When are we healed enough that we could engage with others? Working with justice, working with ending systemic oppression in whatever arena that we find ourselves in. And notice what's happening in your body and also what's going on in your mind. Are you feeling kind of guilty or shaming yourself at all? You're maybe not doing as much as you feel like you could. Are you noticing that you're feeling exhausted because you're putting a lot of effort into that, but maybe you're not healing yourself or giving yourself the nurturance that you need to sustain that? There's so many things that could be coming up right now. So just to be aware of your body, your breath, let yourself be kind to yourself. And if you were to think about deepening this work, taking whatever the healing is that we're wherever we're at now, we don't have to be perfectly healed to be a benefit in the world and to work with others on this. So sometimes it could be, I really feel like I've been kind of holding back a bit. I'm really wanting to go deeper into this. How could I do that? What opportunities come up for me? It might be to read Prentis's book, might be to engage with other people. What comes up for you? And then over the next minute or so, let that inquiry come to rest. Might make a mental note of where you arrived at with this or jot down a few things. In which ways are you presently a transformational character, and what specifically that doesn't feel too overwhelming might you do going forward, that you might be inspired to do going forward?